Next up on the Growing Further podcast, we're joined by Donegal native Vinny Breslin. Vinny was crowned Ireland's Young Entrepreneur of the Year at age of 11 and most recently sold his stake in the SaaS business Uplisting. Vinny's got a really interesting story to tell, so please do join us. Vinny Breslin, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Dave.
How would you like to be introduced? The king of SaaS?
Yeah, no, definitely not that.
We'll bring it right back. You're from Donegal originally. You haven't lost the accent despite living many other places apart from Donegal in the last 20 years.
No, I'm glad to hear that because, I don't get that feedback when I'm back home in Donegal. But yeah, I'm from Donegal town originally.
Well, it kills me when people ask me what part of Dublin I'm from, and
we don't need that.
Yeah. So, and you did engineering in Wales, I believe. So, tell me a little bit about early Vinny.
Oh, God, yeah, it's a long time ago now. But I from Donegal town originally, went to college in Cardiff and did civil engineering. Moved back to Dublin.
Good party town.
Cardiff's a great party town, great spot. Yeah, definitely had more experience outside of the university than in my studies, I would say. But I worked in engineering for a firm in Dublin called T.G. O'Connor's and Associates for a couple of years. A great firm, really nice to work with. I didn't love engineering, so I moved to London and started working.
What kind of stuff was it? Sorry, was it like civil engineering or what kind of stuff were you doing?
Yeah, civil engineering, working in, we did a lot of wastewater treatment plants, roads, bridges, kind of around Ireland.
What you dreamed of doing as a kid?
Yeah. I mean, I do love building things, but I think with civil engineering, you're building a tiny part of a massive project, and you might never see the light of day, or be 5-10 years down the line. Whereas with software or in tech, you can build something today and have somebody using it today, which is really much faster kind of realization of what you've built and seeing people use it, which is something I love. But I moved to London, started working in kind of more creative app development and website development, and I had been building websites since I was 13. It was a hobby of mine, so I loved that side of just doing that kind of thing. Worked in that for a few years and started my first business, which was a consumer SaaS software called Shan's Plan. Did that with my mum, and it was a recipe planner, which learned a lot through it, raised some money. Had some success, but it didn't end up going anywhere, unfortunately. And I promised myself I would never do this ever again. It's too hard to build a business. And that lasted about 18 months before I founded Uplisting with my co-founders, Andy and Tade, and we founded that in London. Well,
let's talk about Shan's Plan first for a little sec before we move on.
Yeah.
So Shan's being your mother of the eponymous Shan. So were you working with her on that? Or was she just a name above the door? Yeah. Or what was it like working with family?
Yeah. It was an experience for sure. We, so mum has she was a teacher, a home economics teacher. That's what she worked at in Donegal, in that vocational school in Donegal town. And she went on to set up this guest house, which is my parents' dream. They worked really hard to set up this guest house, and she had a cookery school in the guest house, and she would teach kind of local mums primarily how to meal plan and make nice healthy recipes, and it was really successful in person. So we thought it might that might work online and with an app basically. So we kind of we converted her system. She had a kind of a Weight Watchers type format, not like Weight Watchers wasn't dietary, but it was how to plan meals and how to use leftovers and this kind of thing. So we built an app, which was a huge undertaking. Didn't have an engineer in the team, so we were constantly building and then trying to get some feedback. And
so what year are we talking?
This was around 2012, I think. 2011, 2012.
So you're probably a bit ahead of your time, because those kind of businesses probably really took off during COVID, probably.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we definitely were. Yeah, I will use that line. We were ahead of our time. There's loads of other reasons why it wasn't a success, but it was a real learning curve. We got funding from Invest NI. We got angel investment. We had around 10,000 users at one point. Wow. And kind of realized that it's a consumer SaaS is our consumer businesses are hard. Consumer software businesses are really hard, and which is kind of one of the reasons why the next one was B2B focused. It was found it much easier.
So what's the difference between consumer and B2B?
Consumer, you need thousands of users to make some money, and you need to have
big volume.
You need a brand, you need all that marketing, you need to just build that presence. Whereas with B2B software, like you need to find, depending on how much you charge, obviously, but with Uplisting, we're like, we need 2,000 customers, and at that we're doing, 3 million recurring revenue a year. It just seems much more manageable. And also people in business can afford to buy things like software. So I found it very, a much different proposition, and much easier for me at least to focus on the end goal.
So how many people working in Sean's plan before you wrapped it up?
Not many, like 5 maybe, and then we'd raise some money and kind of bring in an engineer for a bit and build some code, and then try and sell that, and not that many, around 4 or 5. So
a tight enough team, and then that didn't work out. So that was, as you say, a big learning curve. So you said you never do that again, and then quickly enough you started Uplisting. So how did that come about, or what problem did you see that Uplisting could help solve?
So I was working in an Airbnb competitor in London called HouseTrip, and I was kind of running kind of a B2B software that they had purchased a few years before, and they were finding it really hard to compete with Airbnb. Airbnb had raised billions of dollars, and HouseTrip had raised a few, maybe 60, 70 million, but we really couldn't compete with the size of Airbnb. So I spent a lot of time talking to hosts and property managers, and kind of understanding that there was a real challenge when you have a property or multiple properties, and you're trying to list it on Airbnb and HouseTrip and TripAdvisor and Booking.com and VRBO and all of those ones. So there was a clear need for software to streamline those operations effectively, and that's where Uplisting was born. It was like, okay, we can build what's called a channel manager, where we sync to multiple platforms, and we also do provide other features like automated messaging for guests and pricing and stuff like that. So there's a clear need just based on all of the hours and hours and hours and hours talking to potential customer at the previous company.
So I own, let's say, 20 properties on the Wild Atlantic Way, and I have them all on Airbnb and competitors. Uplisting was helping you coordinate all that, do it a bit more efficiently.
Yeah, so our customers, last year we processed around $300 million for our customers in terms of their bookings. So what effectively, our customers use our software, and they don't log into Airbnb or Booking.com. They just do everything within Uplisting. So very simply, if a booking comes in from Airbnb, we block calendars on Booking.com and Vrbo and everything else instantly. And fundamentally, that means that you don't get double bookings. And double bookings are expensive. You have to pay to rehouse somebody on certain channels, and it's not good for your brand. So that's kind of the fundamental value, as well as if I want to set a price of say $100, I want to earn $100 for tonight. The different booking sites have different commission structures, so you don't want to set $100 in Airbnb and Booking.com. So we kind of work out what the commission structure is and sync the right price to each booking site so that you earn that money, the amount that you wanted to earn, no matter where the booking comes from. And then there's loads of other features on top that automate operations and everything else. But fundamentally, that's what we started off as, was that streamlining of the kind of the core thing you need to do as a property manager. Okay,
and then do you need the cooperation of Airbnb and their competitors to do that? And how did you do? Was that a challenge?
Yeah. That Booking.com was straightforward. Airbnb didn't have an API for years, so we reverse engineered the Airbnb mobile app, and that allowed us to provide that solution where none of the competitors could do that. So we kind of did something that caused a lot of stress over the years, because every time Airbnb changed their mobile app, you had to figure out what was going on, reverse engineer it again, and do it really quickly. So that gave us a big kind of a step in. Were
you pushing against them, or were they aware you existed? If you know what I mean, were they Did they tolerate you?
Yeah, they were tolerating us in a sense. They didn't like the fact that this was happening, but I think they overall kind of understood why it needed to happen. And then eventually they did open up their API. So they have an office in Dublin, and I was just hounding the Dublin office of Airbnb, trying to get any angle possible. I was like, I'm from Donegal, we're Irish, we're an Irish company, please let us in. And then eventually they let us in to use their API, which was. It was a huge step, a huge milestone. I don't think we would have been able to sell the company eventually without having that kind of official integration with Airbnb.
So that was you celebrated that moment.
Yeah, it was a lot of hustle. Yeah. We got there in the end. A lot of hustle though.
Yeah, very good. You didn't start up by yourself, so you had some co-founders. So how did you? Yeah. Were they former colleagues, or where did you come across them?
Yeah, they also worked at the previous company, House Trip, and another reason why this was quite different to the previous company, Shansplan, was those Andy and Tade are like fantastic engineers. So we were able to just build product all day long. So basically the structure of our business when we started off was Andy and Tade building software. I did a lot of the user experience and designed the software, but I did everything else. So just to allow them focus entirely on building stuff. And then I went to sell it and customer support and all of the other dog work I was doing, on a daily basis. And then we started off as a part-time. We didn't raise any money. We self-funded it. It was all evenings, weekends for the first couple of years of the business, which is, a vocation almost. It was tough.
And
going.
Did you have to go approach hosts with multiple properties and that kind of stuff? How did you do that?
We initially I spent a lot of time on Facebook forums and Facebook groups. It's kind of where our customers were. Airbnb was the vacation rental market is not new. It's been around for years and years, but Airbnb really kind of put it in the faces of the masses, and people realized that they can make money renting out homes, and people realized they can make money renting out a home on a long-term basis and then short-term letting it. So there was lots of arbitrage and lots of other models out there, and lots of hosts realizing you can make money and not really knowing how to do it. So they're always asking questions and trying to educate themselves. And I would just live on those forums and provide value and context and help where I can, and then slip in Uplisting where relevant.
By the way, we've got this, I've heard of this cool company that might help you with this. That kind of approach. Stealth marketing or guerrilla marketing, is that what you call it? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe a bit of stealth marketing. And I think the important part was that you're adding value, not just spamming. Yeah. So you'd have some other competitors come in and just spam and they get kicked out, or they have a negative, whatever. But you kind of build that initial 100 users and get some loyalty, and then they start sharing and referring on these forums. And I spent 2 or 3 years just on those forums, and then managed to just exit myself from it, and our customers just did the pitching for us eventually, thankfully.
And so what stage do you decide, okay, I'm going to leave my salary job and go do this full time? Having had the pain of Shan's plan.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely different mindset. It was like, we need to not take a bit more risk averse in that aspect. It's like, let's make sure this is a goer before we do anything. But we did it in stages. So I was the first one to I didn't have a full-time job. I was contracting for a few other companies. But once I was living in New York. It's not a cheap place to live. So it was like, as soon as I could meet my needs effectively. And we just had a baby. We just had our 5-year-old, who's 5 now, Guy. So it was fairly, not the best time to be not having any income.
Big decision.
So I had to make sure it worked. But yeah, that was it. It was like, do we have enough money to pay my salary? Yes. Okay. So I jumped in. Maybe a year later, Taddy jumped in full time, and then I think maybe 2 years before we sold, Andy kind of went full time. So it took a long time for us to get to the point where we were all working full time. In between that, we had brought on other people. So Andy, it wasn't that was just the 3 of us. When Andy kind of went full time, we had others helping in customer support and marketing and sales and that kind of thing. And
so you're living in New York, but it's completely remote. I mean, it's an online business. You didn't have an office.
Yeah. Always remote.
I think I heard that you hadn't met your co-founders in a couple of years or a few years. I suppose a pandemic kicked in as well, which made sure that wasn't possible. But
they were at my wedding in 2018,
right?
And I didn't see them again in person until last August.
5 years,
which is nuts.
That is nuts.
And we talk, you talk every day. It's so funny to think about it.
Yeah, and you had met them previously. I mean, you'd worked with them in an office and stuff. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a jump of faith or a leap of faith, whatever. But so Taddy lives in Slovenia and Andy's in Leeds, so it wasn't They weren't in like, London that we would happen to meet up, or I might happen to be there. But we went to Slovenia last August for a week, and it just happened to coincide. We planned this. We're like, okay, finally we can get we can afford to go on a founders retreat or whatever. Yeah. So we met up in Slovenia, and just happened to be, it was a month, maybe we were 2 months into this potential acquisition. It was very early stages of it. So we spent the whole week just in Slovenia, kind of driving around, listening to an audiobook of how to sell your business and trying to figure out what we should be doing.
Selling your business for beginners. Yeah.
Basically.
And I want to talk a little, before we talk about that kind of process, that whole growing a business kind of remotely. How big did you grow the team to before you sold?
Around 30.
Okay, so that's pretty substantial. So, yeah, I mean, to some people listening to this, that'll be totally crazy. I mean, the office is back in a big way in a lot of places, and a totally remote business is alien to them. But how do you go about that growing a team to 30? How do you keep everyone driving towards the same direction and keep that kind of? How do you get a culture in a business, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And I used to say we didn't really have a culture, but we did have a culture. We didn't necessarily put a lot of effort into having a culture, but we effectively did have a culture. And our culture was, we hired people who were, self-starters, self-sufficient, and didn't need a lot of guidance. So we would, we'd hire somebody, and it was quite organic in that we would, say if it was our sales team, I guess this is how every company works, but in our sales team, we'd realize we need to get more, we have more leads than we can handle currently. So we need to, hire a BDR, a business development rep, or whatever. So we would then go and solve that problem. And it wasn't, we weren't thinking too far ahead. We were still kind of, acting, on the fly, I would say. We weren't at that size where we were, I think, and through the life cycle of the business, we were never over strategizing. I think we were, it was like, let's just get to this point, figure that out. It wasn't, with Sean's plan, did a lot of analyzing numbers and metrics and stuff, and complete waste of time for the size of the business. Something I realized eventually, and that was through reading, business books, that I thought we had to do that. Yeah. But with Uplisting, it was very much a lot more intuition, and obviously we could have done things better, but that's kind of what we did. So we would hire people who were self-sufficient, who were going to go out and do the job themselves, would figure it out. They were problem solvers, and then we'd get we'd ask them just to report on what they've done, on a weekly basis, summary, whatever. And so very much a kind of a hands-off, which is not appropriate for all kind of people. Not everybody wants to work in a company like that, but that's what we did. And I think through that, naturally, people they enjoyed their work, they enjoyed what they were doing, they enjoyed having the buy-in in the company, they understood, fundamentally what we were trying to do and what we were trying to, grow the business. So our engineering team knew why we were building features. They knew the business case of that. It wasn't just go and build this. It was just have a discussion around it and figure out the best way forward. So yeah, I think once we were getting to the point where the way we were working wouldn't have been able to continue to 50, 100 employees, for sure. And we had recently hired a head of operations, Dan, to come in and kind of solve those things for us, because it wasn't a skill set that we had really. So Dan started introducing, more standard things like reviews and, talking, regular one-on-ones and stuff, which we never really did. But yeah, we kind of realized that wasn't sustainable forever, but it worked for us up until this point.
Gets to a tipping point where a certain amount of numbers, you need to put those kind of structures in place, I suppose. And so was it always the plan to try and sell the business, relatively quickly into its existence? Or it was just an opportunity that came along?
It was always an option, and we talked about this a lot. We would try and Andy, Tally, and myself would always talk about what we wanted out of the business, and it was very much making the business work for us and not the other way around. So we weren't we talked about raising money. We looked at the figures we could get, what we could have raised a decent amount of money with the revenue we were on, but the loss of control, for example, was something we weren't really interested in, and we didn't want to just have to talk to. We didn't have a board up until I think 6 months before we sold, and we brought on one additional member to the board, Louise, who's based in Australia, just to help us refine a few things like our sales process and strategy and things. Anyway, so we didn't like that structure of having a board or having another boss effectively, which is like the VC or investor or whatever. So we we knew we didn't want to go down that route. And what we thought we'd do is just continue Uplisting. It's a SaaS, B2B SaaS. Once it's dialed in, is like an amazing cash cow. Like it generates a lot of revenue. As you scale, the costs kind of decrease. It's a fantastic business to be in. So we thought we would just eventually, the three of us kind of step back a bit, but still, push the company forward and, just, earn money that way.
So you do the donkey work up front, build your product or your service, kind of perfect that, and then try and get the sales guys to roll it out. And
and hire a manager and somebody who can take over my role and do our jobs better than how we did to get to this point. But I don't think you could rest on the product as it was. There's constant amount of work to do in the background, whether it's reliability or Airbnb changes their APIs. There's always work to do, so you can't just stop working from a product or engineering perspective. And customers are looking for more features and never-ending backlog of our roadmap trying to meet our customers' needs. But that was the idea. We would just continue as it was.
So between your wedding, I think you said 2018, and selling the business with a pandemic, how did that impact the business? Because I imagine people weren't using Airbnb, Booking.com as much. So was that a big threat?
Yeah. So the pandemic, March 2020, was it?
2020, yeah.
Yeah. The for 2 or 3 months we were like, okay, business is dead. We literally had just hired somebody in marketing to help us kind of take advantage of where we were from a revenue. I think we were on maybe $15,000-$20,000 monthly recurring revenue. So we brought in somebody to help us to, accelerate, and pandemic happened and we were like, oh God, this is the end of it. So we
not really their fault, the new hire's fault. Yeah.
No, definitely not their fault. We thought we were in a better position to competitors. So a lot of our competitors have raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's a lot of heavily funded companies out there that we were competing with. But we thought we were in a better position to them because they had loads of payroll, going through, and they were not, they weren't bringing any money in. So, we were all in the same position where we weren't making money, but we thought we could outlast others, basically. So we gave anybody who was affected in our customer base, we gave them like free subscriptions for 3 months or 6 months, whatever it was, and tried to, look towards the future and long-term kind of strategy. And then by October of that year, we were growing like we had never grown before. We grew like 8% month on month for about 3 years after that. October 2020. And that was because primarily the US Airbnb market just exploded. Like people were looking to get out of cities. They were looking to, not use hotels in urban areas. So the vacation rental market just went nuts in the US in particular. And that wave has continued really since then.
So you kind of weathered the storm for a few months, realized, okay, we'll took a punt and gave people free subscriptions, and then kind of got through the far side of it. But it must have been a bit of high stress involved, I'm sure, for those.
Oh, definitely.
Weathering the storm sounds nice and pleasant, but it's. And you probably had a second kid around then, did you?
He came, I think, a year at 2021. But it was, it was definitely, stressful, and just like, oh my God, all this work, and we just started to see the light. We're like, okay, this business has some legs. We're doing good, and then boom, like, oh my God, on top of all of the personal concerns of COVID at that time and everything else. And we were in New York, and New York was like not in a great space at that time.
It was a pretty wild time when you think about what everyone lived through. Yeah, it was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, we actually went to Shauna and our friends Cara and Wardy went to Pennsylvania I think we went for a month. We went to this rural kind of Pennsylvania. We booked an Airbnb, and we ended up signing up that Airbnb owner as a customer. So I think we could see light. Like we were like, okay, this guy's, we've got this guy. There's people doing the same thing we're doing. So the market's there. And we persevered, thankfully. And
even when you're not working, you were working. Yeah,
always selling.
So let's talk about the exit. How did that come about, and what was that process like? Because I think the interesting part of your story, I mean, it wasn't your first rodeo. You've had something that you were passionate about that didn't succeed, and second go, you've made a real success of it. So, was it a bit of a wrench to sell, or?
No, not
easy decision.
The slightest. very easy decision. No, I think another change from Shan's plan, I had no emotional attachment to Uplisting. Apart, aside from, it wasn't my person, aside from caring for all of our team and everything else, it wasn't like I saw this.
But your mother's name wasn't above the door.
Yeah, exactly,
yeah.
It wasn't family.
Yeah.
So I think we had a real understanding of our value and what we wanted from the business, and we were confident where we were going. And we've had a few acquisition offers over the years, maybe 3 or 4, and we went down the road with a few of those. And eventually, once we got the valuation they were offering, mostly it was like, we're not interested in that, and we're not interested in your valuation. We're not interested in shares in your company because I can't control the value of those shares over time. So we were very clear on what we wanted, and I got a LinkedIn DM in June of last year from a PPE firm that own a similar business, a complementary software kind of in the space, and I was like, okay, let's have a chat. And we had a conversation. And on the first conversation, I kind of outlined what we wanted. I was like, we want a 10x multiple on our revenue. We wanted all cash. And that's all those are our requirements. And they said, yeah, that doesn't seem to be too unreasonable. And
it wasn't a no. So
yeah, it wasn't a no. And they did a lot of kind of due dil on, before we even signed head of terms or letter of intent. And the valuation they put on the business at the letter of intent didn't change through the proper due dil, which I think does happen. So we managed to find a really good buyer, I guess, in summary, and it was on our terms, and we didn't want to sell. We had no need to sell, so we were able to ensure that we got a deal that we wanted to get, and it was, but we couldn't say no to effectively. And thankfully went through the due dil, and we worked with Focus Capital Partners in Dublin, Owen, and we worked Owen and a few with Robbie and a few other lads there, and we worked with Seven Legal in the UK. So we worked with Bill Cogan, who's I know is a friend of yours as well,
friend of the podcast, yeah.
Yeah, so we because we were going through this, and I had no idea how to sell this. This is totally new to me.
Well, hang on, you listened to your audiobook.
Of course, yeah. No, I mean, I knew how to negotiate based on the audiobook, but still didn't know. Like, there's so much due diligence, so much analyzing the accounts and the finances and everything else, and Focus were like all over that, and we literally could not do it without them. We would not have got the deal we did without those guys on board. And then obviously the legal is, it's a hugely legal procedure. So with Bill and the legals, it was
you need someone to guide you through that.
Yeah, and we were bought by an American PE firm, and we were a UK business. So there's complications around different jurisdictions and everything else, which didn't make it easy, but definitely I think it was a relatively straightforward process, and the deal got done in November last year.
Well, amazing! Congratulations on the success, and you're still on board for a while. Not as heavily involved, but what's your role now?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of on call. Basically, I'm like helping the transition.
Like a consultant, emergency consultant doctor or something?
Yeah, I was quite fortunate in that I had managed to step back from a lot of my role over the years, like hiring other people to do a lot of the stuff that I didn't, enjoy doing, whether it's head operations, for example, so like doing operations, that kind of thing. So it was fairly seamless when and understanding that when somebody buys your business, they don't want to have to buy a business and it's all in your own head. So we've done a lot of work to, have documents and, procedures and everything else. So I've managed to kind of step back a good bit, and I, provide some strategy thoughts or, advice if people ask me questions, help them with sales, marketing. But yeah, I think they're doing a pretty good job without me. So I won't be around much longer. Before
we start recording, I described you as a serial entrepreneur, and you kind of bristled, but I guess that's kind of what you are. So do you have another idea in mind, or do you think you're going to go again?
This whole experience has been a total mind melter. It's been like, I feel like I've gone through a total journey in my head over the past few months, and I'm only just feeling normal again. Uh-huh. It's like I don't know. I can't, it's been, I've talked to other people who've sold their business, and this is like, they have similar feelings. So it's been, a bit, I don't know, fuzzy, I would say, and just
why?
unusual.
Because it's such a big part of your life, or what do you do with your time, or what?
Yeah, all of that. It's like you're you're constantly working, and all of us are constantly working for an end goal, and it's a purpose, right? And then you kind of achieve that goal, and you've achieved your purpose. And you're like, you don't have a purpose anymore. So it's quite, I don't know, it's quite confusing, I would say.
You're too young to retire, basically.
Too young to retire. Enjoy. I can really enjoy building products and stuff, and not having. I don't know. I think people do this better than me, but I didn't really have any hobbies or side, things that I did outside of my business, because that was my entire focus. And then it stops, and you're like, what do I like? What do I enjoy? What do I like? Who am I?
Who is Vinny?
Yeah. So I started going back to I feel like I'm going back to my teenage years in 19, 20. And it's like, okay, I like cars. I like playing, I like music. I like golf. So those things, I'm kind of finding myself again, which sounds totally wank, but that's
you managed to carry it off, Vinny, don't worry.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely do something again for sure. I haven't got a few ideas in my head, but nothing. Get the question now is whether you go and try and do something bigger, or do something in a similar, do something more, another B2B SaaS type thing, which is have experience in, I guess.
So it's a very interesting road from the guest house in Donegal to successful entrepreneur exit. So. Did you ever think you'd be an entrepreneur, start your own businesses, or?
100%. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I was when I was the Young Entrepreneur of the Year stuff you have in Ireland, Enterprise Ireland stuff. So I won that when I was 11. So in one of the categories, and then I went to the finals, and I was 14 again. So it was always something I wanted to do.
What was the business?
The first one was called Treasure Ireland, and it was a kind of a treasure hunt for adults and kids, for families, for tourists who go into, we did in Donegal town initially. So you go to Donegal town and little treasure map, and you'd answer clues, and you'd kind of walk around the whole town and learn about the town.
Deadly.
That was the idea.
You did that as a 11-year-old or 14-year-old?
Yeah, 11 or 12, yeah.
That's incredible. That's not on your LinkedIn. You should update your LinkedIn. That's
for sure.
You should lead with that.
A lot of help from my mum with that one, but
that's really cool.
It was always something I wanted. It was always in the back of my head, and then as you get older and you go through college, and I was working in engineering, it's like, oh my god! When you're in your early 20s, you think it's too late to make a change. You're like, oh god, I can't do.
That's my path set now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. And then I managed to kind of snap out a lot and get into it, because definitely could have had a very different path, but happy with the decisions we've made.
Cool. And I suppose that the theme of this podcast is a little bit about, we try to talk about innovation, that kind of stuff, and in the area of software. Yeah, it's constantly evolving, and tech and everything, but everyone talks about AI. You know a lot more about that kind of stuff than I do, so not to put you on the spot or anything, but what impact is AI going to have on the world, positive and negative, in the next kind of 5, 10, 15 years? Or have you thought too deeply about that?
Yeah, I do. I follow AI. I'm really interested in it. I don't feel like I'm at a level where I can give an insight like that, but I do. It's one thing I want to do actually with my time, is spend more time, getting deeper into AI. But thinking about Uplisting and what we could have done with AI, we have there's lots of ways that AI can add value in lots of kind of different features and functions. So in Uplisting, we do automated messages for guests. So these are your check-in instructions, for example. And there's a lot of communication between guest and host and over and back through the inboxes. AI can automate the vast majority of that conversation. So, regular questions like, what's the Wi-Fi password? Where do I park? All of that kind of stuff can be, solved by AI. So I think there's loads, and which barely scratch the surface, and obviously there's enormous investment into it. I think the challenge, from what I understand at least, is that we don't know if it's getting any smarter, or if it can get any smarter. Isn't that it? Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what occurs over the next few months or a few weeks even. It goes so quickly.
Cool. Well, if you figure that out and start a business in that space, and if we're still doing this podcast, which hopefully we will be, we'll get you back on in a few years and tell us a bit more. Give you a few years to spot up on it. Vinny, really appreciate your time. That was really interesting and great to catch up.
Yeah, my pleasure. Lovely to talk.